Howdy folks, welcome to Module 20 of the CompTIA A Plus course. Now I'm sure most of you guys know this already, this is the last module for the course. This last module is called Implementing Operational Procedures and it consists of 3 main sections. Now for the last time, what are the main sections in this specific module you ask? Well folks, that is implement best practice documentation, followed by use proper communication techniques, and then use common safety and environmental procedures. And there you have it. For the last time, that is the last main sections in the last module. And once we finish this module, the videos that will follow this will just be practice questions for those of you that don't know. Now, speaking of practice questions, for those of you that have not been watching my course videos, once we finish this last module, I'm going to go and create a dedicated video or two, which is going to contain practice questions. They will not be the official questions from the official exam because that is not allowed by the vendor. Quite frankly, no vendors allows that. But they will measure you on the same skills and they'll measure you on the same objectives and all that kinds of stuff. So stay tuned for that. That will be the next video after this module 20. Now, considering how much effort I'm putting into these videos, guys, the least you can do is just give the video a like. So, yeah, you can consider that payment for this video. Just give it a like. That helps me out. It helps the channel out. And if you'd like to know when the practice questions goes live or any other video for any of my other courses, then maybe consider subscribing. Otherwise, you might miss it. Alright, guys, let's jump into the first section for the last module, Implement Best Practice Documentation. The first thing we're going to be talking about in this section is standard operating procedures. So this is better known as SOPs for short. Pretty much all companies has this. It doesn't really matter what industry you're in, whether you're in medical, law, sales, IT, you name it. There's pretty much not a company out there that does not have some form of SOP, a standard operating procedure. So this is, I suppose you can think of this as everybody's job description. You know, it's a list of things that you need to do in your day's time. So maybe on a Monday, you've got to do this in the morning and this in the afternoon. On a Tuesday, you've got to do this and you've got to do that. Everybody has a clear set of instructions as to what they need to do and when they need to do it and how they need to go and do it. So in a nutshell, that's basically what it comes down to. So standard operating procedures is procedures for custom installation of software, if we're coming at this from an IT perspective. So how and when do we go and install software? Can any willy-nilly and his uncle just go ahead and install software, or is there a procedure that needs to be followed? Maybe they need your password. This can be as simple as them just asking you to come to the machine, type in your administrator password, and there you go. Everybody's happy again. Or is this a matter of they have to go and request an application first, after which you're going to go and review it, or someone from IT is going to go and review it, and then only once it's approved will it actually get installed. It's going to be remotely, you never know. Standard operating procedure can also be new user setup checklist. So coming at this still from an IT perspective, once and when you eventually have a new user, and this is going to happen in all companies, we all hire people at some point in time. What is the procedure for hiring someone new? At least from the IT perspective. We probably need to give this person a new device. Maybe it is someone's old device. This can be a brand new device. So how do we go about issuing this person of what they need? Are they going to come into the office? Are we going to, send it to them via mailman or something? If they are in the office, are we just going to give it to them? Or are we going to provision this machine of something? Maybe we're going to provision it of an image. Maybe we're going to install an operating system on it, like Windows perhaps. Maybe we need to give this person some drivers and updates and softwares. Possibly we need to go and connect a VPN connection on that machine. You never know. So it includes all of that. And what standard operating procedure also includes is end user termination checklist. So eventually, nobody works for the same company forever. We all leave a company at some point in time. And eventually, when someone leaves the company, what is the procedure for that person? Now, we're not saying this person that's leaving the company is out to do no good. I mean, people leave eventually at some point in time. If they were, for example, using a company asset, like a company laptop, what's the procedure for that? Are we going to go and just take the laptop from them? Are we going to ask them to bring it into the office? Are we going to go and wipe it before we give it to a new employee? Are we even going to give it to a new employee? Or are we going to retire this device? Are we going to donate this device? If the person was, for example, using their own device for the purposes of work, which we refer to as a BYOD scenario, bring your own device to work scenario, If they were using their own device for the purposes of work, how do we go about that? What is the procedure for that? Are we going to go and wipe the device remotely using something like Microsoft Intune? Or what exactly are we going to go and do about it? That's basically what it comes down to, boys and girls. All right, let's move on to the second topic. Ticketing systems. Now you'll find it whether you're working for an actual IT company, which is full-blown IT, or whether you're working in the IT department for a company. Very many of these companies, especially the medium to large size ones, have what we call a ticketing system. The screenshot that you guys see there is just a more or less idea of what one might look like, what you might expect, but it doesn't mean it will look like that. Take it with some salt. I mean, obviously there's many kinds out there. It's kind of like saying, hey, this is what a car looks like, but all cars look different. Some of them have got big wheels, some of them have got small wheels, some of them are green, some of them are white, some have got big engines. Every car is different from another, but they all do the same thing in the end of the day, and the same can be said about this ticketing system. So the ticketing system, should you have one, the idea here is, should someone, a customer, a client, or a user have an issue, they ideally need to log what we call a ticket. Some folks call this a job card. In this case, it's called a ticket. And in this ticket, they need to specify who they are, possibly which department they're in, what the issue is, what category the issue falls into, how severe the issue is. Some companies might rate this from minor, major to critical. Some companies might rate this in levels, level 1, 2, 3, 4. Sometimes it goes up to level 5. And depending on the severity of the issue, you might either just be in the queue. In other words, we'll get to you when we get to you, or we'll assist you immediately. But it depends on who you are, what the problem is, and how severe the problem is. So these ticketing systems are going to ask for user information. So who is the user? They're going to ask for device information. Not really which device you're logging the ticket from. It's more about which device is the one that's giving you issues. Assuming, of course, this is a device. Maybe this is a network issue for all we know. It's going to ask maybe the user for a brief description of the problem. This just makes our lives as technicians a little bit easier. And as I've said, you get different categories for this. So when someone, user, customer, or client, logs a ticket, they're going to have to choose a category. I've seen not all ticketing systems ask for this. Some do, some don't. So this could possibly be a request of some kind. Maybe they're just requesting something new. They are requesting a network cable. Maybe the one they have at the desk is not so nice. Maybe it's broken. They are requesting a new laptop. They are requesting a new mouse, a new keyboard. They are requesting a new charger for the laptop because the old one is not working. So those are examples of requests. It could be an incident that took place that they want to report. Maybe the machine just randomly keeps shutting down, or it did shut down and it's working fine now. They could not print this morning, but now it's printing again. Maybe there was a small fire. Maybe something happened. Maybe the cable is broken. So maybe they just want to report an incident. I personally don't really see a lot of those. People tend to complain when something is not working, but when something is working, they don't really bother. They don't go over the effort to go and report stuff. That's just most people. It could be a problem they want to report. In other words, they need assistance, and that's the most common one you're going to expect to find. And now, as for severity levels, like I said, you can get many kinds. It depends on the ticketing system. It depends on your company, how they want to rate these problems. So from this system, or the one according to CompTIA, you get critical, major, and minor. Now, the ones I've worked with, guys, I've worked for many companies, and I've worked in many companies with many clients and many kinds of softwares. They don't all ask for those kinds of things. Some of them work in levels, level 1, 2, and 3. Maybe up to level 4, level 5. The last company I worked with, I was the main engineer for the whole province I was in. And there, they had levels up to level 5. So just to give you an idea how this worked in my scenario, and every company is unique, from level 1 to level 3, it's a matter of we'll get to you when we get to you. We were the ones as technicians that would rate people's tickets. So when someone phones in, or they email us, or they send us a message saying, hey, I've got an issue of some kind, we would rate their ticket. Because people are obviously going to go and rate their tickets as a very high number. Meanwhile, it's not very important. Everybody thinks their problem is the biggest problem, even though it's not necessarily the biggest problem. So we would go and rate these tickets. If someone has a normal, general, everyday issue, it'll probably be a level 1 or a level 2, which means we'll get to you when we get to you. You're in a queue, and we'll get to you when we get to you. If it's level 3, up to level 3, this is normally when it starts affecting possibly more than one user in that company, or this company is possibly starting to suffer some sort of financial loss because of this problem. So this is still within business hours. So up to level 3, we will assist you only in business hours. But if you have a level 3 ticket, there is a chance that you may or may not get more than one technician that will assist you now. And there is a chance you might jump the queue a little bit because of the severity of your ticket. Now from level 4 and level 5, how that worked was that's the kind of tickets we will assist you even with after hours. So this is something like a server that's fallen over, hasn't physically fallen over. It's a terminology we use when a server has crashed or something. Maybe there's a ransomware attack or someone's hacking this company. Something very, very bad is happening. So that's something we'll assist you of even after hours. And majority of the time, you'll find that there's normally more than one technician assisting you. So that's just to give you guys a little bit of an insight into how this actually works in real life. As I've said, some companies use ticketing systems, some don't. There might be a chance that you will deal with the ticketing system directly. So tickets will come in, you open the ticketing system, you look at the ticket, you handle the ticket, you take care of the problem, and then you close the ticket. This is one way a company can actually keep track whether you're doing your job or not. Other situations might be like when I was working, the last company I worked with, I did not deal with the ticketing system directly. We had a person that would basically sit there all day, the whole day, just dealing with the ticketing system. That's how many we got. It was a nice lady, very awesome lady. And she would contact all the technicians, me being one of them. And whenever a ticket would come in, she's going to ask, okay, guys, who's available? Who can assist this client or this user? And basically, she would dish out these tickets like sweets. Dish them out, and once they're closed, I just inform the lady the ticket has been closed, and she closes it on her side. Now, a problem that all technicians tend to face with these tickets is you're always going to have some users in a company. This is now not for the exam. This is just real life stuff, guys. You're always going to have some users that refuse to log a ticket. They want you, they expect you to deal with their problem, to assist them as quickly as possible, but they refuse to log a ticket. There are people that's especially guilty of this is normally managers and any form of superior. I'm not throwing them all in the same boat, but from my experience, the higher up guys are the ones that's most guilty of this. They don't want to log a ticket. You solve their problem, and even though you solve the problem, you ask them very nicely, sir, ma'am, please log a ticket. And the reason why you want to do that is to basically show to your other superiors that you are actually working. Because if there's no tickets, they're going to see on the system, okay, so this bra was not doing anything this whole day. Meanwhile, you were working your butt off the whole day, but there's no proof of that. And when it comes to your performance review or whatever, then it's going to look like you're just not doing anything. You're just fooling around. Meanwhile, you're working your butt off. People just refusing to log tickets. So that's a problem that unfortunately all technicians are facing. So I'm just going to suggest that you guys try and force these people to log tickets as much as possible. Tell them you're not going to deal with their problem unless they have opened a ticket. All right, moving on. Asset identification and inventory. Now, all companies, big and small, have assets. These are things like your laptops, desktops, servers, access points, firewalls. I think you guys get the idea. These are all assets that belong to the company. Now, obviously, staff are also assets, but we're not talking about staff here. We're talking about physical pieces of equipment, hardware for the most part. Now, a very small company, if we look at something small, like a company that's got 5 users, maybe up to 50 users or so, we're not too concerned about asset identification and inventory because for the most part, you'll know what you have. You'll find that most often they don't even have a technician, and even if they do, the person will know exactly what they have because there's so few computers lying around and stuff. I mean, you're going to know what you have. You're going to know what specs these machines are. You're going to know which ones are broken and which ones are not. But if you start looking at something like a medium to a large company, this starts becoming a problem because you're not going to know how many machines you have. You're not going to know where they are. You're not going to know what specs they are, which ones are still working, which ones are not. And I'm just talking about computers here. I'm not even talking about other forms of hardware yet, guys. So asset management becomes a bit of a pickle, a bit of a conundrum. So we do what we call identification and life cycle procedures, and we also do what we call an inventory list. You'll find that medium to large size companies, we will go and record how many machines we've got. So we've got 102 laptops and we've got 501 desktop PCs. And then with regards to that, you are going to go and write down the specs of these machines. And you're also definitely going to go and write down the serial numbers. The serial numbers is more for if these devices go missing, they get stolen or they get lost or something. And then you can go and report it to your insurance and you can get a payout from the insurance. Company's assets are normally insured. But you need to have the serial number to get that done. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So get the serial numbers, get the specs of these devices. Now, why do we need the specs? Because that helps you with planning. It helps you with testing. It helps you with deployment. If I have, let's say, 500 and something computers, and I need to deploy some sort of new software or something that my people are going to need, maybe this software only works on machines that's got 2 gigabytes of RAM and more. Now, I need to go and check, do all my machines have that amount of RAM or more? Because if some of them don't, I need to exclude those ones that don't have enough RAM, or I need to ask those people to bring their machines to me so I can upgrade them with more RAM, or so I can replace them with a bigger machine that actually has more RAM. At the end of the day, as you can see here, having an inventory of all your assets helps you with planning, helps you with deployment, and helps you with things like theft and all that kinds of stuff. So we tend to use things like asset tags and IDs. I mean, that's going to make your life a heck of a lot easier. But it's not the only thing we use. We also use other things in IT like network topology diagrams, which is not even, this has got nothing to do with laptops and desktops and stuff, but it is something we tend to go and use a lot as IT people, and many other things as well, which is not even mentioned in this course. So these are basically diagrams of your network or your client's network, what the network looks like, where what is in the network, what the IP addresses is, what the subnets is, where's the firewalls, what's the access points, where are the access points, what's the login details. So when the time comes for you to go and do some sort of deployment, upgrades, troubleshooting, whatever, then you know exactly where what is to go and do your troubleshooting. That's just going to make your life a little bit easier. Everything's just going to go smoother. It's just going to be more professional, obviously. All right, change management concepts. Now, I'll be real with you guys. This was actually one of the biggest thorns in my side when I used to be in the field. So, whether you work for a big company or small company, this might apply to you, it might not apply to you, but it's more common to find this applying to bigger companies. I had many clients, some of them were the government in my area. And when I go to a client, even if it's to do something as simple as swapping a hard drive that has now failed in a server. This could really just be something as simple as swapping a hard drive. It sounds simple, it sounds pretty straightforward, and for all intents and purposes, it should actually be pretty straightforward, but it's not. Before I can go ahead and change that hard drive, I need to ask this client or this company, guys, do you have a change management document or some sort of change management procedure in place? Most often they do. And in a nutshell, what this comes down to is I need to fill in some sort of documentation. This can be on paper, it can be digital, where I basically in a nutshell say, this is who I am, this is from which company I am here on this day to do this thing, which is to swap a hard drive. I'm going to do it on this server. The reason why I'm doing it is because of the following, and this is what I'm going to do with the old failed hard drive, and I'm going to go and list that this has been backed up, or backup procedures have been taken place. There's a long list of things that I'm going to go and fill in on that form. Pretty much everything except the blood sample. I've been known to exaggerate a little bit. So, and this is for many reasons. So, if the poop eventually hits the fan one day, they can always go through the old change management documents and they can go and check, okay, who was the last guy that worked on this hard drive for this server? And they can go and see, it was this guy. He might be the culprit. So, I might be a suspect if something goes wrong. So this could be maybe I stole some data, so in the event of theft or something like that, they can trace where they went wrong, or if there's just general issues that took place, general problems. This also allows them to go and do a little bit of research just to see where things went sideways. So in the topic of change management concepts, we've got change requests, guys. So the purpose of the change, like I said, and the scope of the change. Why are we changing something? In my case, it might be something as simple as a hard drive. In real life, guys, this can be something much bigger than a hard drive. This can be something like maybe deploying Microsoft Teams in your company instead of having Skype for Business. That's a pretty big deal. I mean, if your company currently has nothing in place or they're using Skype for Business and you want to go and switch over to some sort of new technology like Microsoft Teams, maybe your company is deploying Microsoft 365 in the company environment, that's a pretty big deal, guys. So for something like that, you need to go and mention what is the purpose of the change, why are we doing it? What is the scope of the change? The full scope. And before you can do anything, whether it's big or small, there's a change approval that needs to take place. Something we kind of talked about already. So you need to go and test and implement the change plan. So you're going to go and do as many tests as you possibly can. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. You are going to have to go and list who's the responsible staff member or members. So if stuff goes wrong, you need to know who you can go and blame and who you can go to and who's going to know what's going on. You need to know who or what is the affected systems and what's going to be the impact here. So if I'm going to go and do something as simple as swapping a hard drive, which systems may or may not be affected by this, and what will be the impact of that? Will there be any impact? Will there be none impact? What exactly is the consequences here? Because if stuff goes sideways, we need to know what we can do about it. Sandbox testing. This is something that's very useful. Unfortunately, we cannot do that at everything. That basically means if you're about to go and install something, deploy something, configure something, you want to go and test it in an isolated environment so that if something goes wrong, it doesn't affect your actual company, your actual servers, your actual environment. It's kind of like a safe bomb box, if you want to call it that. So if something goes wrong, it's isolated to that little environment, and eventually when you get the results that you were looking for, then you can go and deploy it in the production environment. I mentioned earlier, if you're going to go do some sort of change, besides getting it approved, you need to go and mention the date and the time and exactly what the change was. And lastly, this is probably one of the most important things, your rollback plan. So should stuff go sideways, whether it's a big thing that you're changing or a small thing, what is your backup plan? So if a server crashes because of this hard drive you swapped or whatever the case might be, what is your plan of action? What is your backup plan? Alright guys, so that is the end of the first main section in this module. Let's move on straight to the second main section. Use proper communication techniques. Now before I dive into the first topic in this section, you're going to find that there's quite a few things in this section as well as the last section in this module. Some of them are obvious things that you might have heard of. You might think, okay, well, that sounds pretty obvious. But there's always something you did not know. Or there's always something you did not think of. Now, this is actually very important, though. Even though these last two modules, no, not last two modules, last two sections, even though they're going to sound a bit silly here and there, guys, I assure you there is definitely questions in the exam about them. So it's very important you still go through it, even though it seems silly and you might think, oh, I know this or I know that. Just go through it. There might be something you did not know. There might be something you did not think of. And at least then if you went through it and you get questions about it in the exam, you'll know what the correct answer is. Alright, so here is the first topic in the section, professional support processes. The first thing is provide proper documentation on the services provided. So whether this be just you, maybe you're a freelancer, maybe you're working for a company of some kind, maybe you're working for a certain department of some kind, whatever services you or your company provide proper documentation on what that is. So if you're an IT company or you're delivering some sort of IT service, maybe you're just something as simple as an IT service provider, you need to provide documentation to your customers, your clients, your users, saying exactly what you provide and exactly what the T's and C's is associated to that. So if you are, for example, an internet service provider that provides people with internet access, you're going to go and mention in those documentations, okay, cool, I am company X, I'm providing you with internet, and you're going to have access to this service for 24/7. It's going to be day and night, every day. And should you have some sort of problem with our product, which is the internet in this case, internet access, you can contact us, but it needs to be between 7 o'clock in the morning and 7 o'clock in the evening. If you have a serious issue, maybe your business is being affected by it, then maybe you can contact our after-hours support. But if it's not a serious issue, you're going to have to contact our help desk within normal working hours, which is maybe from 7 until 7. So that's basically an idea as to what proper documentation can be. So you need to set and meet expectations, timeline, and communicate that with the customer. Now, I've seen so many companies and so many people are guilty of this, even in IT, guys, where people will go and tell the customer or the user, okay, cool, I am or we are going to take this long with this issue, and then they don't meet that timeline. So let me give you guys an idea. Imagine you take your car or something to a dealership or whatever, and they tell you it's going to take half an hour to fix your car. Now, you go do some shopping, you get yourself a cup of coffee or something, you come back half an hour, and they tell you, oh, shucks, we're not done yet, it might take another half an hour. You go back, after another half an hour, and it's still not done. Now, that is not meeting the expectations of the customer. You're not communicating clearly. So, coming at this from an IT perspective, let's say someone brings you a laptop or a desktop or whatever the case might be. If you know this issue might take you 1 hour to complete or to fix this issue, you tell the customer, you could probably go and tell them it's going to be 1 hour, but I don't recommend that. My recommendation here, guys, would be you give them a longer time frame. So if you think it's going to take you 1 hour, you tell them it's going to take you an hour and a half or 2 hours. That way, if you accidentally end up taking longer than an hour, you come out looking like a rainbow or like a flower. So let's say it takes you an hour and a half, and you said 2 hours. You actually knew it was going to take you 1 hour, but you accidentally took half an hour longer, and you told the customer originally it's going to take 2 hours. Now, when the customer gets there after 2 hours, maybe even before they get there after 2 hours, maybe they're going to get there in an hour, so you can tell them, no, we're done. And they're going to think, wow, because you finished like half an hour ahead of schedule. You told them it's going to take 2 hours, took you only an hour and a half. Meanwhile, you actually took half an hour longer than what you expected you were going to take. But you come out looking like a flower now because you told them you're going to take 2 hours. So that's living up to the customer's expectations. And this applies to any industry, guys. So many people are guilty of this. They always tell the customer or the user, it's going to take me this long, and they end up taking the same amount of time or longer, usually longer. And when the customer or user gets there, it just sets a bad vibe. It's very unprofessional. It just makes everybody upset. So let's not do that. Also, guys, clear instructions for repair and replace. So I'm going to come at this from an IT perspective as much as I possibly can, and I'm going to try and give you guys as many as IT examples as possibly can. So let's say this is maybe a computer that you've been fixing. Let's say the computer didn't want to start. You did some troubleshooting, and you come to the conclusion that, oh, it is the power supply unit. That is why this machine does not want to work. And you've come to the conclusion you need to replace the power supply unit because it's always easier and cheaper to go and replace it, and it's also safer. Now, before you can go and replace that, it is a good idea to always contact the user or the customer first. And if you're working for the same company, then you probably don't need to because it's going to come out of company expenses. But let's assume this is a customer, perhaps. So before you just go ahead and replace that system unit or that power supply unit, contact the customer, ask them, sir, I've come to the conclusion it's your power supply unit that's at fault here. It needs to be replaced. It's going to cost you this much. Can I proceed, or would you like to do this at a later stage? That's just called being professional. I mean, if someone is fixing your car, for example, and they come across some sort of issue regarding this car of yours, imagine now they just went and replaced this problematic part that it was. Maybe it was a part. They just went and replaced it, not consulting you first whether you have the money to go and pay for that. And now afterwards, when you get to the shop, they're like, okay, cool, it's working again, but you owe us this much because it ended up being this part and that part. They didn't bother to call you. They didn't bother to find out where you've got the money. Maybe you had to go and drive around with the car for another month or so you can save for that part first, but they didn't do that. Now, that's being very unprofessional. So instead, call the customer and ask them, sir, we're working on your car. We've seen this is the part that's broken. You should be able to drive with it for another month or so. Do you have the money to replace it now? We recommend you replace it. And if they say yes, you do it. If they say no, you don't do it. Same applies to a computer, guys, or anything in IT. It is a common courtesy just to ask the customer, this is the problem. Can I go and replace the following part? Do you have the money? This is how much it's going to cost. And if they say yes, then you go ahead. Now, also under the topic of professional support processes, they mention you should follow up with the customer or the user at a later date to verify satisfaction. I personally have not really seen that happen in IT that much. I mean, there's certain situations where you might want to do that depending on what the issue is. So maybe the customer had ransomware and you fixed the issue, but you want to make just extra tippy-toe sure that the issue really is gone. So I would say use your own judgment to decide when you need to go and do this or not. But there is certain industries where I would say, yes, this is definitely a good thing to go and follow up with the customers. Maybe if you are still working on an issue for the customer, then yes, call the customer or user, inform them of what you have done, where you're at with this problem, and when you think it might be resolved. But if the problem has been addressed and it has been fixed, generally it's not really needed in IT to go and follow up with the customer afterwards. But when I was in the field, my company forced me to phone every client the next morning at 8 o'clock and inform them of exactly where we are with their ticket. Remember those tickets we spoke of earlier. So any tickets that might still be open, I need to call every one of those customers. Some of them care, some of them don't care. The majority of them like this service. We phone the clients or the customers. We tell them what we've done so far, what we think the problem might be, what we're going to do next, and when we expect this problem to possibly be resolved. The majority of the customers and the clients, they loved that service. And then obviously you get some of those that just really don't care. So if you still have a ticket open, then yes, call the customers or the users and inform them of what you've done so far. But if they've been closed and it's working, I would say you can make that judgment call whether you want to go and do that or not. All right, moving on to professional support delivery. All right, so when you need to go to a client, guys, be on time. When you need to go and remote connect or talk to a customer or go for a meeting, be on time or be 5 or 10 minutes early. Not too early because that's also just annoying and unprofessional, but be on time or be about 5 or 10 minutes earlier. Also, avoid distractions. This is especially applicable if you're physically on site at a customer or maybe aware there's a user. Imagine now you are the customer. I want you guys to put yourself in the shoes of the customer. We're going to do that a lot in this module. So you are the customer. You are calling me out to come to your company now. You're paying me by the hour to come and fix your issue. Now, while I'm fixing your issue, you see me on my phone. I'm taking personal phone calls. I'm taking phone calls for other customers. I'm texting. I'm on social media. Wouldn't you be annoyed by that? Because the feeling most customers have here is you are paying me by the hour. It's not like a once-off fee. You're paying me by the hour. But in that hour, I'm spending some of that money now, some of that time on my personal calls or I'm assisting other clients. A lot of customers are not comfortable with that. They don't like that because they feel they are paying me. They're paying me for that hour, but now I'm helping other people in that hour. That's not fair, is it? So avoid distractions, guys, like personal calls and interruptions, and also avoid texting, social media sites, that kind of stuff. It's just not cool. Also, deal appropriately with confidential and private materials. So this can be applicable to a lot of things, but most often this refers to you maybe just working on someone's laptop or desktop. You come across some personal stuff that might be open on a screen. How do we deal with that? And this is actually used to be a question in the old A+ exams. I'm not 100% sure if that one is in the new A+ exams, but it probably will be. At the end of the day, 1 plus 1 will always be 2, so it's safe to assume CompTIA probably still left this in the A+ exams. I know for a fact it was in the 1000 series. I just haven't seen them yet in the 1100 series, but it's safe to assume that it's there. So if a customer has a laptop or a desktop, and in that laptop or desktop, there's documents that's open on the screen, private or confidential documents, what is the correct course of action here, guys? So they ask you to work on the machine. The first thing you should do is ask the customer or the client to close any private or confidential documents and stuff. Tell them to save the stuff. So tell them, sir, ma'am, anything that's confidential or private, can you please save it and close it? Now, it's not that we can't get a hold of it. We can definitely get a hold of it, guys. We can. We're technicians here. We know how to access stuff that's not supposed to be on the machine. So we can definitely access the stuff afterwards. So it's more to put their minds at ease, and it's just being professional. Meanwhile, we can actually get a hold of the stuff if we really wanted to. So yeah, always ask the customer to close anything that's private and confidential, and tell them to save their stuff that might not be saved. Now moving on to professional appearance. You'll find a lot of these topics have the word professional in them, don't they? So when it comes to professional appearance, the first thing we want to mention here is professional appearance and attire. Now, I'm not saying you guys should come to your customers or your users or your clients with a suit and tie. I suppose in some cases you might if you're going to present something. But for the most part, guys, no. Maybe just a nice button shirt or a nice t-shirt, some jeans, some proper sneakers or something. The way I would say is visualize yourself having to get into a ceiling or a roof. If you can visualize yourself getting into a ceiling or a roof comfortably and maybe standing on some wooden beams in the dust in the dark, climbing on things and whatnot with the clothes and attire you've got on, then you know you've got the right clothes and attire. It still needs to look neat though. Neat, but comfortable enough for you to be able to get into a roof if you need to go and work on some cabling, all that. So that's a tricky balance because sometimes you might never get into roofs. If you're never going to go into something like a roof, then maybe just get yourself a nice button shirt or some jeans or something. That should be, I would say, suitable. Use proper language and avoid jargon, acronyms, and slang when applicable. So when you speak to any customers, clients, users, guys, do not use fancy IT terminology because these guys don't know what you're talking about. It's not that these guys are, let's say, dumb. No, I suppose some of them might be. It's more they are in a different field. They are in a different industry. So to give you an idea, I'm very, very good in IT. But when I go to my doctor and my doctor explains to me in medical terms what is wrong with me on that particular week, I've got no idea what they're saying. So if I get back to home and my wife asks me, okay, so what did the doctor say? Are you okay? I'm just going to shrug my shoulders and I'm going to be like, I don't know. They said this and they said that, or they mentioned this word. I think I don't even know what half the stuff means. Now, does that mean I'm dumb? No. It simply means I have no idea what they're talking about because it's a different field. So generally, whatever field you are in, so in this case, we are in IT, we want to try and use language and jargon that the user or the client would understand without making them feel stupid. I can't believe I said that. But yes, it's what it comes down to. So try not to use fancy words. Do not swear. Do not use any slang. Just use proper language and grammar and keep it professional, obviously. Also, be culturally sensitive. Wow, I think I just butchered that word. So I think you guys know what I mean by that. So use appropriate professional titles when applicable. And if someone maybe is in a certain culture, if they are a certain religion, or if they've got certain views, try and avoid those topics. I generally, when I went out to my clients, I do not talk about religion. I do not talk about politics. I do not talk about culture. You want to try and avoid these topics because somewhere along the line, someone is going to butt heads with someone. So go there, get the job done. Maybe ask them about the weather. How are you doing? How's the weather? Just small casual conversation. Be friendly, be polite. But you want to try and avoid certain topics because that can very easily end, well, badly for you. I generally avoid certain topics. Moving on to professional communications. You see what I mean by the word professional? That word professional is going to be in every title from this point forward, or at least most of them. So when it comes to professional communications, guys, actively listen, take notes, and avoid interrupting the customer. So let me see if I can give you guys an example. Imagine you have a customer that comes into the store, or you're talking to them over the phone, and their machine is giving them some sort of issue. Now, very often you're going to find that the customer or the client or the user, they're going to start explaining to you what they think the problem is. Sometimes without you even asking them. I know we're supposed to ask them questions because that's one of the ways we solve problems is by asking questions. But sometimes without you even asking questions, they'll just talk and talk and talk and tell you, yeah, my machine is not working ever since last night and this and this and that. And yeah, so that's what's going to happen. I would say listen to the customer or the client. Yes, I know you guys don't want to do that, but listen to the customer or the client, and you'll find that most often you actually already know what the problem is. And it's simply because of your experience. Maybe way in the beginning you might not, but as time goes by, and this applies to any industry, guys, as time goes by, as you gain experience, you're going to know what the problem is before they even explain to you what the problem is. So maybe within the first 10 seconds, when they started telling you what their problem is, you already knew what the problem was. Now you want to try avoid interrupting the customer here while explaining the issue to you, even though you actually knew what it was in the first 10 seconds. But you need to know where to draw the line in the sand. There's going to be a point in time where you're going to have to interrupt the customer. You need to know when that is. I can tell you guys, you need to do that judgment call on your own. So at some point in time, politely and professionally, you need to interrupt the customer and basically inform them in a nice professional manner that you know what the problem is now, and this is maybe due to them, even though it's not really due to them, and basically make them feel like they're heard. At the end of the day, a lot of people just want to feel heard. They just want to feel important. It's a human nature. It's a human element. So something I can suggest to you guys, and this worked a lot for me with my clients. You're welcome to steal this from me. By all means, use it, make it your own, change it to your own way if you want to. I would normally interrupt the customer or the client very politely, and I'll tell him, sir, ma'am, based on what you have told me, I think I know what the problem is, and I'm going to go look at it now. So you see what I did there? I said, based on what you have told me. So I make them feel like it's them that led me to the answer here. And that basically makes the customer or user feel important. And it makes them feel like they've got their message across. And, I suppose it gives them that sense of accomplishment. They feel important. They feel like they've got their message across. They feel like they've got an accomplishment here now of something. At the end of the day, you actually knew what the problem was from the beginning. Within the first 10 seconds, you knew what the problem was. You kind of came to that conclusion on your own. But you're making the customer feel like they are the ones that gave you the answer and like they led you to the answer. It makes them feel important. It's a human psychology thing, I suppose. the end of the day, yeah, you guys can use that if you want to. You don't have to. Other things you might want to do when you talk to these customers or clients is ask questions and clarify statements. So if you don't really know what the problem is, or if you're not 100% sure whether you know what the problem is, ask questions, guys. Clarify certain things with them. Ask them, okay, can you just repeat what that was? Ask them open-ended questions. Ask them closed-ended questions. Whatever gets you to the answer. If you don't know the difference between those two, guys, don't worry, that's not a question exam. Open-ended questions is where you force the customer or the user to give you more than a one-word answer. Close-ended questions is where they just give you like a one-word answer, like yes or no, that kinds of stuff. All right, moving on to the last topic in this section, difficult situations. Now, guys, you are definitely going to see this at some point in your life. Not necessarily in the exam, although I think this will probably be in the exam as well, but in the field, whether you're working for one company, many companies, there's going to be a point in time when you're going to deal with difficult users, difficult customers and clients. It's going to happen. For some of us, it's going to happen a lot. For some of you guys, it might happen very rarely. Either way, you need to know about this. So always maintain a positive attitude and project confidence. So even though these people are going to be swearing at you and yelling at you, insulting you of this and that, you cannot let it get you down. It's something that happens to all of us IT guys. Just project confidence and, well, I suppose fake a smile if you need to. Do not argue with customers or be defensive. There's going to be times where you're going to feel like you want to argue with the customer. You know for a fact the customer or the client's wrong, and it's going to feel like it goes against every being of your fiber to not argue with the customer. But yeah, it's difficult. Avoid dismissing customer problems. So sometimes you might think, oh, this customer doesn't know what they're talking about. You're going to tell them, no, sir, that's not a problem. Avoid doing that. It's going to make the customers feel like they're not important. So even though you know the customer's wrong, try not to let them feel like that. Avoid being judgmental. Yeah, don't judge people. We're not going to go and do that. We're not here to judge people. Collaborate to focus on solutions. So there's going to be times when you might have to work with the customer, or you might have to work with other people, and this might be people you don't like, the customers or the users. There might be people you don't like, and well, there's nothing we can do about that. Try and focus on the end goal here and try to come to a solution. That's part of life, guys. You're going to have to work with people and teammates you don't always like. Diffuse tense situations and focus on positive outcomes, and end contact if there is abuse or threat. So if you find yourself in a sticky situation where a customer or client is yelling at you, swearing at you, try and avoid contact. Now, this is obviously easier if you're on the phone. So if it's a phone call and they yell at you and swear at you, do not yell back. Do not swear back. I know it sounds ridiculous, but it is something you're going to have to go and try and do. They might swear at you, they might yell at you, and you know for a fact they're wrong. Do not swear at them. Do not yell at them. Tell them you apologize. I apologize for the inconvenience. We'll look into the matter. It is something that's going to happen. This actually doesn't just apply to IT. And if you go look at something like a waiter or a waitress in a restaurant, guys, you know how many difficult customers those guys have got to deal with. You're going to get some customers that are just completely unreasonable. They'll yell at you. They'll swear at you. Maybe they were stuck in traffic or something and they're taking out their anger on you. And whatever they're mad about, it's got nothing to do with you even. But yet they will take their frustrations out on you. The same applies to being an IT. Very, very often people are going to take out their frustrations on you, even though it's got nothing to do with you. The whole reason why they're upset is actually got technically nothing to do with you. And at the end of the day, there's nothing you can do about that. You cannot yell at them. You cannot swear at them. But if it gets to a point where you can feel, okay, this is getting too bad, it's getting out of hand now, rather just hang up the phone. Do not yell back. Do not swear back. Just hang up the phone. And if you've got a superior, maybe just inform the superior that, hey, this is the person I spoke to. This is what they said, or this is what happened. I hung up the phone. And then if that comes back to bite you later, then at least your superior would know about it. You're gonna get some of these customers or clients that if you hang up the phone on them, they'll try to go above your head. They're gonna try and contact your superior, your company, and say, this is the worst service I've gotten ever. This is the worst technician. He or she doesn't know what they're doing, and they're going to try and basically put you in a bad light as much as possible because they just do that for no apparent reason. You get people like that. So do not let that get you down, guys. Be professional. Do not disclose experience via social media outlets. So there's going to be times when you're going to feel like you're really down in the ruts and you're going to want to vent a little bit. Maybe vent between your friends, maybe vent to your boss or your colleagues, but do not go and post it on social media. That is a very bad thing to go and do. It is very unprofessional, and God forbid if someone happens to see that, if the wrong person sees that, you can end up in a lot of hot water at your company. You want to try and avoid that. Right, guys, that brings us to the end of the second main section. Moving on to the third, use common safety and environmental procedures. First thing up, compliance with regulations. Now, this is going to be unique for pretty much every one of you guys. Every country, every state, every province, you'll find even some industries have their own laws and regulations. So if you're an IT, go check in your country, in your state or your province what your regulations, your laws state. And also go and check in your industry. So if you are working in the IT department, but you're working for a law firm, you're working for some sort of medical institution, or you get the idea. All of these industries have their own laws and regulations they have got to abide by. And it's not the same for all countries. So go check your local health and safety laws, because they may or may not affect your work. Go check any building codes that may or may not apply in your area. And also go check any environmental regulations. You'll find that is also going to vary from area to area. That is something we're going to get to a little bit later in this section. So just stay tuned for the environmental part of things. But for now, let's move on to the next topic, electrical safety. Now, I'm going to be honest with you guys. What you see here, or what I'm about to go and put here on for you guys, is not everything that was on this particular topic. I actually removed some of the content because I feel it's completely irrelevant to you guys. I know for a fact it's not in the exam, and it's stuff that you guys are not going to deal with, and I don't want you to go and deal with it because you are not qualified electricians. So this is quite a few things they mentioned about electricity and power. Anything that I deem as not important, I've removed from this topic for you guys because it's not an exam and it's not something you guys are going to work with. So it's stuff you don't need to know. The stuff you do need to know because it's going to be an exam or it's important just for general work, that I've left in this topic. So the first thing I've left for you guys is proper power handling and personal safety. So from a technician's perspective, an IT person's perspective, if you're going to be working on something like a computer, a server, a printer, or whatever, it's always a good idea to go and unplug the device from the power first. I mean, that's common sense, I suppose. It's common logic. Just unplug it first. That's just, well, for your own safety. But other than that, I don't want you guys working on power. So when it comes to working on IT equipment, yes, unplug the device. But you are not going to work on the actual power itself, and I don't want you to work on the actual power itself. It's not part of the course, it's not in the exam, and you guys are not electricians. So unless you guys happen to be a qualified electrician, I don't want you anywhere near power besides plugging the device out and plugging it back in. You're not qualified electricians. It's not worth your life. Also, when it comes to electrical fire safety, you guys are obviously going to be working with a lot of equipments like server rooms and stuff like that. Should an electrical fire start one day, maybe behind a server, maybe behind a computer box or something, there's a certain type of procedure you need to go and follow, and obviously that includes, putting the fire out. You can't just go and use water to go and put out any fire. It depends on what kind of fire we're dealing with, but normally when we talk about electrical fires, you want to avoid good old H2O, in other words, water. You want to avoid that. You're going to go and use CO2. It's a dry powder. It's a common fire extinguisher that you'll find in most office environments. So if you find an electrical fire, guys, do not grab a water hose. For the life of me, go and grab one of the fire extinguishers on the wall. Most of them are normally CO2. It's a dry white powder. That's what you want to use on an electrical fire. If you're going to go use liquid, well, yeah, that's asking for trouble, isn't it? Moving on to other safety hazards and mitigations. So the first up is trip hazards. There's not a lot of things in IT that we worry about when it comes to trip hazards. So this is most applicable to things like server rooms. Obviously not just server rooms, but it's most applicable in server rooms. So look at the server room. There's normally a lot of cables. Power cables, network cables, fire cables, this and that. And generally you'll find a good technician that's worth his salt would normally go and do what we call cabling. And all the cabling is going to look neat. We normally pride ourselves on it, actually. We'll take photos of it afterwards. We'll take videos of it afterwards. We'll go brag about it on social media. And assuming there's not a non-disclosure agreement between us and the company or the network, we'll go brag about it. It's an IT geek thing where we go and brag about our cabling. We also talk about lifting techniques. Common things that you guys probably know already. Like don't lift with your back, lift with your knees. If you're going to go pick up something heavy like a computer or something, don't lift with your back, lift with your knees. In the long term, your back's going to thank you for that. Also, safety goggles and masks. I see that's the only thing that's actually mentioned in this course, but I also want to add gloves in there. So there's not a lot of things we're going to go and use these safety goggles and masks. So if you look at something like goggles, that'll probably be if you're going to go clean out a computer or a server because of the dust. If you're going to be working on a printer because the toner, it might go into the air. It's like a powder kind of ink. Same with masks, also for dust. So if you ever find yourself needing to work on a printer inside a computer that's got a lot of dust, or if you need to climb into a roof somewhere, there's a lot of dust in the roofs, guys. Even though you can't see it, there's a lot of dust in the roofs. I can't tell you how many times when I was younger, I used to climb into the ceilings and the roofs of buildings, and I would not necessarily see the dust. I would, do my thing, install cables to do whatever I need to go and do in the roof. When I come out, the rest of the day, I can't stop coughing. Sometimes for 2-3 days, I'll continuously keep coughing and coughing. And it's not like phlegm on your chest. It's kind of like something is stuck in your chest. And it actually hurts at some point in time. So really, 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 if you can, guys, wear a mask. Like a normal mask you would use if you go to the doctor. That kind of mask. Those normal COVID-19 kind of masks. That'll be more than sufficient. Use those. You're bound to have some lying around somewhere because of the pandemic that took place. Wear a mask when you get into the roof. And I'm going to add on to that and tell you guys to wear gloves. Normal cheap gloves that you can buy from like a hardware store or wherever, they cost almost nothing. You can keep them in the back of your car between your tools or something. They cost literally almost nothing. And what I've noticed is when I used to climb into roofs and stuff, very often it'll be wooden beams. Sometimes wooden beams, sometimes not. And usually the case is you're going to have to walk on these wooden beams or hold on to the wooden beams, otherwise you're going to fall through the ceiling. And because these beams are wooden in most cases, you're going to get a lot of splinters in your fingers, and that really is uncomfortable. It really, really hurts. But if you're going to wear gloves, then, well, yeah. So when I say gloves, guys, I'm not talking about latex gloves, not the medical kind. I'm talking about the kind of gloves you would use in a garden. So if you can visualize yourself working in a garden or picking a thorny flower with that kind of gloves, that's the kind of gloves I want you guys to wear when you get into a roof. At least then you're not going to get these splinters and stuff in your fingers. That is not something in the course. It's not an exam. That is just general life lessons I want to give you guys. That's going to make your life easier, and you're not going to get hurt like I used to get. So learn from my mistakes, in other words, is what I'm saying. I made the mistakes so you guys don't have to go and make the same mistakes as me. Wow, I feel like a parent. Anyway, moving on to environmental impacts, location, and equipment placement. So when we say location, guys, and equipment placement, we're not coming at this from an angle of wireless signals. I mean, I know we spoke about that kind of stuff earlier in this course, not this module, where it's very important to go and place certain hardware components like a router or an access point. It needs to be as central as possible, so that everybody has access to the signal. That's not what we're talking about here, guys. So when we say location and equipment placement in this module, we're talking about the weather. And we're talking about conditions like temperature. So is it humid or not? Is it hot or cold? That's what we're talking about when we say environmental impacts. And that's what we're talking about when we say location and equipment placement. You need to be very careful where you place certain things. For example, I had a client once. This was actually the government or a division of the government in my country. And what happened was they had a server room on the second floor. And every afternoon from around lunchtime until about 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, the servers would basically become useless. They become so slow to the point where they are useless. And after investigation, I found out, and I located and I found that this server room has windows. It's not the kind of windows you can open. They're shatterproof, bulletproof kind of windows. But this server room has got windows, and they were facing west. And what happened was, every afternoon after lunchtime, the sun would start shining through these windows, making the server room hotter than what it should be, and it was shining directly on the servers, the back of the servers at least, the sun, which means the servers get hotter and hotter. So ideally, we want servers to stay as cool as possible, not as hot as possible. A hot server is a server that's not going to respond to you. So that's what ended up happening, and we ended up having to move the server room underground. So they had a special room we built in the basement, in the parking lot, with concrete and steel and all that kinds of stuff. So at the end of the day, that was a heck of a lot better. As soon as we moved the server room, all the problems went away. So their temperature was an issue. Anyway, moving on. Maintenance schedules. So for certain things, it might be more important to do maintenance than others, besides your normal routine maintenance. If you look at certain items that are in very hot or very cold or very humid or very dry place, you might have to maintain these things more often than usual. You might have to go and clean them more often. So if a device is in a very dusty environment, and you were scheduled to service this device every 6 months under normal circumstances, you might have to do that earlier now. You might have to do it every month now instead of every 6 months. So that brings us to dust cleanup. So if you find yourself in a situation where you need to go and clean up dust in a server, in a computer case or a laptop, generally we use compressed air blasters to go and do that. In some cases, we might go and use what we call PC safe or toner safe vacuums. It's a special kind of vacuum. It's not the kind you would use in your house. It's a special kind of vacuum. It's not going to suck off the circuitry from the motherboards and stuff, or the circuit boards. And it's a special kind of vacuum that does not get fudged up if it sucks in toner. Toner is powder ink, for those of you that don't know. Most vacuums don't like that. Most vacuums, if you're going to start sucking in toner, you're going to find out very shortly afterwards the vacuum's going to stop working. At least that's from my experience of what happened. I tried that, trust me. Most vacuums don't like that. So you're going to have to go and use a special toner safe vacuum for that. Lastly, guys, under the topic of environmental impacts, temperature, humidity level awareness, and proper ventilation. So we kind of covered this already. Told you guys, temperature is very important. You want to keep servers as cool as possible, not ice cold. Humidity is important. You want to try and strive for about 50% humidity. Watch out, that's a question in the exam, guys. It does not have to be exactly 50%. It's going to be almost impossible to get that. But you want to get your humidity in places like server rooms as close as possible to 50%. So if it's like 45 or 55 or somewhere in that area, that's fine, guys. But not too low, not too high. If humidity is too high, condensation is going to take place, and obviously that's bad for circuitry. I mean, you're going to see a short happening or something like that. If humidity is too low, it's going to be dry. And if it's too dry, static is going to take place. And static also causes shorts. So in both cases, there's going to be a short. And obviously proper ventilation as well, just to make sure stuff is actually cooling down the way it's supposed to. Right, moving on. Electrostatic discharge mitigation. So first of all, what was electrostatic discharge? I'm saying it like that because this has actually been a topic in the course already. So for those of you that's been actually watching the full course, because this is the last module and it's one of the last topics, you would remember that we actually did discuss this topic before. It was very briefly, and I can even tell you where it was. It was in module 1. Now you don't need to go and watch module 1 unless you haven't watched it yet. Module 1 is all about building motherboards and putting components into computer and stuff. And you'll find that CompTIA randomly put this topic in there between all of those topics. And I suppose it makes sense because there we are talking about installing components into the motherboard. And if you're about to do that, you need to know about ESD, electrostatic discharge. So for those of you that don't remember, ESD, electrostatic discharge, is simply a matter of the human body's got enough electricity in it to blow certain components like motherboards, RAM, chips, that kind of stuff. There's enough electricity in the human body to, well, basically blow certain circuitries. Scary, right? Now the word mitigation, as the title states, is solutions to the problem. So electrostatic discharge mitigation. So we're talking about solutions to the problem. You can kind of see the solution to the problem there on the right hand side in the picture. But we'll talk about that in just a moment. So when it comes to proper component handling, you want to go and do what we call self-grounding. If you ground yourself and you start touching certain components like a motherboard, you're not going to go and blow the circuitry on the motherboard. There's many ways you can go and ground yourself. The most famous ways, according to CompTIA, is anti-ESD wrist straps and service mats. You guys need to watch out for that. I can guarantee you that's a question in the exam. You will get asked about that in the exam. So I'm going to ask you, what can user 1 do to avoid ESD or to mitigate ESD or to avoid it taking place, this ESD? And the answer in the exam will always be anti-static wrist strap or anti-static rubber mats. It's either going to be the one or the other. They will never give you both in the exam, but if they do, then you know, okay, it's both of them. But because they're both equally correct, they normally only give you the one. The one I normally see in the exam is the anti-static wrist strap. It's a little strap that goes around your arm. You can actually put it around your ankle too if you really want to. It's got a little cable coming out of it with a little alligator clip, and you can clip it onto a rubber mat, or you can clip it onto the floor, or you can clip it onto something metal. Normally, the average technician, if you ever find one that actually wears this, because nobody wears this in real life, they would go and clip it onto the actual frame of the computer. Not the outside, the inside of the frame. Because the outside frame, even though it might look like metal, it's not really a conductive metal in most cases. So you need to clip it onto the inside of the frame, which is actually conductive and all that stuff. Now, how we do this in real life, just in case you guys are curious, in real life, if a technician opens the box, they slide off the panel, they normally touch the inside of the frame. And as soon as you touch the inside of the frame, you actually discharge yourself into the frame. It doesn't harm the components in any way, but you just need to keep in mind that if you walk away, even if it's just 2 steps to pick up a screwdriver, and you walk back 2 steps, you need to go and do it again. So in the beginning, it's going to require a lot of muscle memory from you to force yourself to keep doing that. But there's going to be a point in time where you're going to keep doing that without even noticing. It's kind of like putting on your safety belt in a car. It's supposed to be muscle memory. You're supposed to do it without even thinking about it. So, yeah. But according to the exam, according to the course, what do we need to use? We need to use an anti-static wrist strap or one of these rubber mats. In real life, nobody uses that though. Now I know the picture there on the right is supposed to show you guys what it looks like, but that picture sucks. So here is another picture of what an anti-static wrist strap looks like. I believe I actually did use this one in module 1, but here it is again. So for those of you that did not watch module 1, that's what an anti-static wrist strap looks like. And where it is in use, you can see what the technician did there. They actually went and clipped it onto the inside of a computer frame. And that means you don't have to go and touch the frame yourself because it's constantly just discharging into the frame itself. Anyway, let me bring that back, that other picture here. All right. Lastly, guys, before we move on to the next topic, proper component storage. So never mind you just touching components, which you should not go and do. What about storing components? If you look at things like motherboards and RAM chips and hard drives, when you go and buy them, you'll find they come in a special kind of bag. Sometimes it's transparent. Sometimes it looks very silverish in color. These bags are anti-static bags, guys. So it basically prevents the components from, touching something that's got static on it, like human hands, and it prevents them from, well, getting damaged. So especially new equipment comes in these bags. You'll find any technician that's worth their salt would normally keep the bags in a drawer somewhere or whatever, and whenever you need to move components, you'll put them back into those little baggies, special baggies. They look very cool, I have to say. So anti-electrostatic discharge shielding and dissipative packaging. So in other words, those fancy anti-static bags is what I'm talking about. All right, second last topic, guys. Building power issues and mitigations. There's that word mitigations again, which just basically means a solution to a problem. So when it comes to building power issues and mitigations, CompTIA says we get power surges, brownouts, and blackouts. Now, what is a power surge? That is when the power temporarily goes higher than what it's supposed to be in volts. Not necessarily amps, but more in volts. So if your voltage in your country is supposed to be 110 volts, it might temporarily go up to 150 or 200 volts. If your country's volts is supposed to be 220 to 240 volts, it might temporarily go up to 300, 400, or 500 volts. That sudden spike in voltage is normally enough to blow a lot of sensitive equipment like TVs and computers and any other form of electronics. This most often happens when maybe the power was completely out, and when the power comes back, you'll find it like for a fraction of a second or a second, there's a bit of a surge, and that's normally enough to, well, blow components. It also tends to happen in electrical storms. So if there's an electrical storm of some kind, and the lightning strikes some sort of power line somewhere along the line, power line somewhere along the line, wow, I didn't mean to say it like that, but hey. So if the lightning strikes a power line somewhere along the line, now I'm just doing it on purpose, that might cause a surge down the line. Oh, there I go again. And that's going to blow your components. So how do we take care of things like power surges? We use what we call surge protectors. You get the kind you can just plug in directly into the wall. You get other ones that's got like a multi-plug, and it can just give you multiple outlets. But at the end of the day, it's surge suppressors, and you get these built into many other components as well. Now, as for brownouts, what's that? So instead of the voltage going temporary up, it actually goes down. So the power's not gone. The voltage is just lower than what it's supposed to be. So if you're supposed to be at 110 volts in your country, it might be at like, let's say, 80 volts. If it's supposed to be 220, then it might be down at like 180 or somewhere like that. Certain things might work, certain things will not work at all. Personally, brownouts is actually a heck of a lot worse than a blackout, which is just no power at all. I would prefer a blackout because the power is just out, and eventually it will come back and then everything would work. But a brownout, or one where it surges, that's bad because the power is going to be too high or it's going to be too low, and that, my friends, actually really damages certain components. Most things don't like that at all. Also, we have what we call battery backups. Now, what is a battery backup? I think everybody knows what that is. So a battery backup, the best example I can give you guys right now, is an uninterruptible power supply. In other words, a UPS. There's a picture for you guys of what a UPS looks like for a computer. That's a normal computer UPS. The idea of that is you're supposed to plug that into the power, and then you plug your computer into the UPS. And if the power goes out, it's supposed to give your computer power for another couple of minutes so you can save any open documents and turn it off. It's not designed to keep your computer on the whole time while the power's out. No, absolutely not. It does not have what we call a deep cycle battery. We're not going to talk about deep cycle batteries, but if you're curious what that is, feel free to ask me in the comment section and I'll ask you questions. Alternatively, you guys can ask me on my Discord server and you can find that link in the video description, like way at the bottom of the video description. It's literally the last thing in the video description. Where you can also ask me what a deep cycle battery is. It's not part of the course though. In short, a UPS, at least these for computers, are not deep cycle. They're designed to keep the computer on only for like 2 or 5 or 10 minutes. It's just enough time for you to save any open documents, save anything that's open, turn off the PC safely, and there you go. That's what it's designed for. It's not designed to keep something on the whole time while the power is out. It was not designed for that, guys. Alright, moving on to the last topic in this section, in this module, and for the course, guys. Now, once I'm done here, don't disappear on me yet. There's a couple of important things I want to mention to you guys, so stay tuned for that once we finish this last topic. Last topic is responsible disposal. Now, there is questions about this in the exam, but it's all about something very specific for the most part. So starting with compliance with government regulations. Every country has their own regulations and laws when it comes to disposing of certain things. So these could be things like batteries, toners, old computers, hard drives. Basically, it's some sort of electronic waste regulation that your country has. And you'll find the majority of countries out there in the world has some sort of law regulation which prohibits people from just throwing certain things into the trash. These things have to be disposed of properly or they have to be recycled properly. So whenever we talk about health, safety, or disposal, you'll find we normally mention material safety data sheet, which is known as MSDS for short. Guys, I'm highlighting that for you guys in capital letters. I'm highlighting it for you guys in pink there. And you need to know that that's very important for the exam. You're going to get a couple of questions in the A+ exam about health and safety and anything like that. You don't even have to read the question, although you should read the questions. Always read your questions properly. Read the possible answers properly. What I can tell you guys now is any question you get in the exam about health or safety, you'll find that one of the 4 answers they give you is MSDS. You can always just choose MSDS in the exam and you will always get the answer right without even knowing what the question was. That is just something weird I noticed. So anything to do with health and safety and disposal in the exam, you just keep choosing MSDS, and you'll get the answer right every time, guys. But yeah, that's just something interesting I noticed. I still want you guys to read the question properly, read all your answers properly, because you never know. Maybe CompTIA changes that one day. So this MSDS is documentation for handling and disposal, but it's also about health and safety. Now, when it comes to proper disposal, guys, like I said earlier, this is for battery disposal, toner disposal, and other devices and assets like computers, hard drives, that kind of stuff. And it normally all comes down to the electronic waste regulations of your country, should your country, of course, have that. I know, for example, in my country, I cannot just go and throw batteries in the trash, although I know some people do that. You cannot just go and throw toner cartridges in the trash and a lot of these other things. There's laws against that. Now, a lot of people get away with that in my country, but I know they also pay you good money for that. So if you go and recycle batteries or toner, you actually get a lot of money for that in some countries. I know in my country, you get a lot of money for batteries, but it depends on what kind of battery we're talking about. You get a lot of money for all toner cartridges. Also depends on what kind of toner cartridges. Some of them are worth a lot of money. Some of them are worth nothing. Alright, boys and girls. That is the end of A+. It's the end of everything in A+. Before you guys disappear on me, I'm just putting it on the screen as a reminder. The exam practice questions, which I've been mentioning quite a lot in my modules, in my videos. So the next video after this module 20 is going to be A+ practice questions. We'll see if people like it, then maybe I'll do more than one. But I'm going to start off with one just to see if people actually like it and enjoy it. We'll test the water, as they say. I'm going to say it again, and I've said it before. These are not the actual questions from the exam, but they will measure you on the same objectives and test the same skills and all that kinds of stuff. So if you can get my questions right, then you should probably be ready for the exam. At least that's the idea here. So stay tuned for that video of the practice questions, guys. Keep your eye out for it. Maybe subscribe. If you're not subscribed, then at least you'll know when the questions goes live. Alright guys, I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, like usual, please give the video a like. I hope you guys have learned something. If you have, give the video a like. Show me that you've learned something. Maybe mention in the comment section down below what you've learned in this course or this module. It's always fun to see what people learned, what they did not know. And if you'd like to know when the practice questions videos goes live, please maybe subscribe as well, otherwise you might not know. Lastly guys, before we disappear, special thank you and shout out to all the sponsors of this channel. Thank you to the Patreon sponsors guys. I thank you very much for sponsoring these videos and a lot of the other videos. PayPal guys that's been sponsoring me, thank you very much. To all the guys that's been clicking on the thanks button below the videos or just buying me a coffee or a milkshake, thank you very much. If any of you guys would like to sponsor me as well or any of the videos, you can find out details in the video description down below. And speaking of video description down below, literally at the very bottom of the video description, you'll find the Discord server link I spoke of earlier, which is an IT community of like-minded people, most of which are studying courses like A+, and quite a few other IT courses. So I'm in that server, other people studying A+ is in that server, and many other courses. So if you've got a question, you can ask it there. Either myself or other people in the field will answer your question, and you're more than welcome to answer the questions of other people that might be struggling. So yeah, it's the idea is for people to help one another. It's free IT training is basically what it is. Right guys, I hope you've enjoyed this course. I hope you guys have learned something. I really do. Best of luck with your exams for those of you that's going to be writing the exam. Best of luck with your career, and I hope to see you guys on one of my other courses.